if they do have the courage to read outside of the purview of their little cloistered book called the Bible, they will find a whole treasure of information. A treasure of information. I'm talking about the kind of treasure that, did you see the mummy? Yes. Remember when them boys, they stood up there and looked out when they turned on the lights on that? That's the treasure. That's just part of the treasure you're going to get if you just come out of this Christian nonsense of belief. Now follow me, and I'm going to speak as clearly as possible. Prayerfully, I will read for your understanding. The Catholic Church asserts it was founded by Christ and on the Gospel Peter. Well, let's just see what this claim amounts to. In John, I guess 15. So when they had dined, Jesus said unto Peter, Simon, son of Jonas, loveth me not more than else? He saith unto him, Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. He said unto him, Feed my lambs. This is in John 2. As already explained, Peter is the earth. Peter is not a person. Peter is a principle. And this it is that must feed the lambs, the life upon it. As the statement is repeated 3 times, it implies the 3 biologic kingdoms. The text then is nothing to do with the Catholic Church, save to refute it. As Jonah is purely mythological, calling Peter his son makes Peter also mythological. Today, intelligent people do not swallow Jonah, yet they do swallow this similitude. There are people who actually said that they believe so strongly in the Bible that if it was Jonah that swallowed the whale, they'd have believed it. In John 32 it says, And the Lord said, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan hath desired to have thee, that he may sift ye as wheat. In 32, but I prayed for thee, for thy faith failed not. And when thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren, in Luke 22. Now this text has something to do with the Catholic Church. Its close identification of Peter with Satan is very revealing to those who understand occult literature. But of this more in a moment. Now, the next text of 18 and 19 should suffice. In 18, And I say unto thee, Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I will give thee unto thee the keys to the kingdom of heaven. And whosoever shalt thou bind on earth be bound in heaven, and whosoever shall be loosed on earth shall be loosed in heaven. This is what the Catholic Church has used to found Peter as the head of his church. But 4 verses later, Jesus calls Peter Satan. Here we go. But he turned and said unto Peter, Get thee behind me, Satan. Thou art an offense unto me. Thus, if the Catholic Church is founded by Peter, it is founded on Satan, as I said. A fact we have long suspected. Satan simply means matter, and so does Peter, the rock. Therefore, the two are one. Peter is but the New Testament Esau who founded, or was rather, founded a city called Petra, the rock, also Edom, or Atom, the earth. This it is that binds and looses according to its laws, St. Peter's keys. And what it binds and looses is the 7 life principles. The 7 churches of Revelation are an outline of this. This binding and loosing Peter is also the testament of Pharaoh. He too bound and loosed the life force Moses. Warfare with him represents this. And Paul's quarrel with Peter during the Bible times is the same meaning cosmologically. As this binding and loosing is of nature, that of the church is utterly false and pretentious. And this includes the blessings and cursings, its excommunications, so dreaded by its people, no moral or spiritual effect whatsoever. Its results are political and social only, and so but another means of power. And also it was with Peter. We need to understand the church. Jesus was not speaking of an institution that we call the church, Catholic or otherwise. In fact, there was no such word or institution in his time. The original was the word ecclesis or ecclesiasis or ecclesis. Ecclesie, and it meant only a gathering, an assembly, no pope, priest, or hierarchy. Now, to understand this gathering or assembly, we must remember the position of the Creator when these alleged words were spoken. It was immediately before the Transfiguration, the invisible elements made visible. The ecclesia was therefore the gathering or assembling from space of the planetary elements into the sun, Hades. The choosing of this personnel is therefore but the New Testament parallel of the Old Testament's chosen people. So, likewise, is the rock on which it is founded. The precedent for this is the rock or stone that grew in Nebuchadnezzar's dream until it filled the whole entity. This is the earth itself. Here we see why the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Why should they, since this hell or Hades created it? After its creation, the elements were again gathered and assembled in evolution. And the ecclesies here is the organic life forms, the life force with which it had to be under the end of the world. Thus the church founded on Peter the rock is but the earth and its biological life forms. This is the only Catholic or universal church there is, that is nature. It is the human institution. If the human institution was meant, why did it become divided instead of assembled into the 70 different odd sects of Christianity? If Christ chose Peter to head his institution, why did the apostles ignore his wish and elect James the Just instead? He, not Peter, was the first pope. Later, he was deposed and stoned to death. And Ananias, who deposed him, was also deposed. Does this sound like divine selection to you? If then the leaders were ignorant and credulous, as were the original peoples. Now check this out. This is deep. The New Testament, all this is forgotten now. We're taught that Christianity was a new revelation of truth, and its founders enlightened men and saints. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Ignorance is the soil in which religions grow, and Christianity is no exception. The New Testament itself calls the disciples unlearned and ignorant men, and the Jewish judges before whom their converts were brought pronounced them as idiots or idiotai, from which we get the word idiots. Still later, they were called fools in Christ. The Samaritan doctor called them Thartacs, Thartacs, at their period, in the reign of Thartak. Thartak was a Kemetic god of credulity and vulgar faith. He was portrayed as a man with a book, a cloak, and the head of an ass. He appears in the Old Testament as Tartak, one of the foreign gods that Solomon worshipped. If then the leaders of Christianity were ignorant and credulous, what are the masses that follow them? According to Leakey, they were, in all intellectual virtues, lower than any other period in history of mankind. They were made up mostly of the poor and the obscure, who were drawn into embrace the Gospels by an inner need, and whose low position on the social scale was a standing ground of reproach against the new religion from the side of its adversaries. It is only the religion of simpletons, the ignoble, the senseless, the slaves, and the womenfolk and children whom they wish to persuade to join their congregation or to persuade. This is what Celsus said. Celsus said, the rude and the menial masses who had hitherto been almost beneath the notice of the Greek and the Roman culture flocked into Christianity. Okay? And Hodges on Celsus said he disliked them for their poverty and ignorance. They seemed to be presumptuous and impertinent people who undertook to be the teachers, having never learned. I will not sit in the seat of synods while geese and cranes confusedly wrangle, St. Gregory said. The many had begun to play with psychic and spiritual forces let loose from the mysteries, and the many went mad for a time and have not yet regained their senses. They had a full share of tumult, anarchy, injustice, and war. The primitive Christians were men whose ardor was fierce in proportion to their ignorance. These are all the people talking about who the Christians were back then. All this the apologists smothered in lies, and now our deluded preachers, teachers, playwrights, and scenarists paint these early Christians as the inspired few, fighting and dying for some true faith, brand the really inspired so-called pagans as ignoramuses. Tacitus calls Christianity pernicious superstition. The new faith is a perverse and extravagant superstition. This is what Pliny the Elder had said. A superstition vain and fanatic, said Suetonius. Today, a still deluded race looks upon these statements as pagan opposition to the light of the world, where they were just but deluded people of our spiritual understandings. Thus, whatever the early Christians suffered, it was not, as the church asserts, because of the new gospel.